All right, Drew. Without further ado, I know last time we started by talking Kentucky Derby and everything, but the show ran really, really long. Let's get into the power rankings instead.
Let's do it.
16. Let's talk about this team. Obviously, at 17, we had my Titans. They're out of the running. We're not talking about my team today. We are talking about yours, but they're not in this spot. Let's talk about Seattle. This is a team that I think, even though I think in long term has set themselves up in a better spot by trading someone like Frank Clark away, trading away their best defensive end, and really only defensive end and front four player at least. I think they're in a better place going forward 2 or 3 years from now. Right now, immediately, they're not going to be as good losing a guy like Frank Clark, who put up 13 sacks last year. He was really the only legitimate defensive lineman they had that made any kind of impact this past year. Are you concerned that they dropped as far as they did? Because this is a 7-spot drop for us. Is 16 fair to a team that made the playoffs last year?
This team it's one of those teams. Steve, I'm glad you could join us, man. I'm sorry that your life's a little rough right now, man.
Don't apologize. We're glad you're here now.
All the best wishes to you, man. I hope everything turns out okay. We definitely don't want to ignore that. Just real quick, guys, we appreciate all your guys' comments, everything you guys come into the show. If we can help you out in anything in life and definitely talk sports and make you forget about all the struggles, that's what we're here for, because that's why we do this show.
Absolutely.
But talking about the Seahawks, man, it's one of these teams that you look at and go, they won the free agency and they lost free agency. They won free agency because they went to this draft with only 4 picks. One of the most talented drafts they said they've seen in a long time. All the experts sit there and go, there's talent all across the board in this draft. And they went there with 4 picks and ended up with somewhere around closer to 10. I mean, this team won in the sense of that free agency. But draft. But now when you talk about real free agency, you're talking about bringing in players that you need, something that you missed in pieces. They really struggled on this end. Losing Frank Clark, regardless if it was a right thing or a wrong thing, it is an issue, because now you don't have a pass rush. You are now hearing rumors of your Doug Baldwin, your best receiver, not being able to come back, never playing ball ever again. And, to lose someone like that and that caliber is why this team dropped so far. And it's not because we don't think this is a playoff team. It's not because they can't be better than that 16. It's because of all those losses until they play their first down in week 1. We don't know what kind of team this is going to be.
And they haven't had any significant additions, Drew. You look at this, you can't sit there and point to a single guy that's joined this team. Some people say DK Metcalf, but he's a second-round receiver with a lot of kind of question marks in his agility and how much he's going to be able to do outside the deep ball.
Right.
And then you're losing guys like Doug Baldwin, for sure this time. I mean, I know he spent a lot of time out last year, but we're pretty sure Doug Baldwin's going to be out for, again, another extended period of time.
Right.
You're losing a top pass rusher like Frank Clark. Nobody came into this organization, even though they had all these picks, that I'm looking at and I'm saying, this team's going to be good because they brought this guy in. They're going to be able to turn it around. They need to hit on some of these gems, and they need to perform right away. I just don't see it, man. I think the Seahawks are going to take a step back, and for the first time in a long time, we're going to be talking about them being more of a 7-9 team instead of a 9-7, 10-6 team. So I see a couple games slip here. I still think they're going to be a good team. They're going to be a tough team to play week in and week out. Any team with Russell Wilson is going to be. But do I see them necessarily making the playoffs or making a deep run? At this point, I got to say there's better teams than them.
Yep, and Steve's agreeing with us. Steve's saying that Seattle could be hurting for a while, and maybe it's, they sit there and say Russell Wilson's contract is team friendly, but that's a lot of money to one person.
It's not team friendly.
Yeah.
Like I've heard that too, but you can't sit there and tell me anytime you're paying a guy that's $34, $35 million a year that he's going to average out over the life of this contract, that it's team friendly at all. You want to talk about team friendly, talk about guys like Brady and Drew Brees who are making about 20. If you think about it, that's $15 million a year you could be paying to a middle. That's C.J. Mosley on your team. That's Earl Thomas. That's any one of these guys. That could even be Landon Collins on your team, Drew. Yeah. So I can't sit there and say it's team friendly. He got paid. Now the Seahawks need to adjust. They've done that. They've tried to shift their focus more to the draft. The problem is when that happens, you need to get lucky more than good. I think the Seahawks have a lot of building to do, and I'm not saying they're going to be a bad team, but
and Pete Carroll's done it in the past. So then again, at least in my opinion, I'm not sitting there saying the Seahawks are not in the playoffs this next year. But right now, until some of these gyms show themselves through this draft, this team has dropped dramatically on rankings.
Absolutely, and I think the 49ers will be better. I think the Cardinals will be a little bit better. I think the Rams may be a little more susceptible, but still, we're going to be talking about them a little bit later. Steve also says Russell contract is Russell-friendly. I agree, and Jeremy, good to see you, man. Let's move on. Let's talk about a team that has moved up significantly since our offseason rankings, the Redskins. Just like Seattle lost 7 spots, the Redskins have gained 7 spots since before this offseason started. Drew, at 15, Are we overranking a team that doesn't have a legitimate starting quarterback?
That is an issue. That is a big time issue. But let's not forget the Redskins were in talks about making the playoffs. Even when Alex Smith went down, even when they were juggling quarterbacks between Colt McCoy and Josh Johnson, this team has definitely been struggling a little bit with quarterback. They got a little bit more stability in there with Case Keenum and Haskins, but we don't really know how they're going to pan out. Really, to me, these rankings go up is because that defense got better. That defense got stout. And picking someone like Landon Collins, even though they kind of overpaid for him, man, he is a difference maker in that backfield.
Now, Steve's kind of saying Haskins is a plus here. He's saying Haskins is going to burn the Giants fans for years. Maybe he has that opportunity. I think Daniel Jones is also going to have something to prove because everyone has done nothing but criticize that guy. The question is going to be which one of them pans out, or maybe neither of them do. The fact of the matter is the Redskins are much more set up to help a young quarterback succeed because they have a great defense. You don't need him to score more than 20 points in a game, and you legitimately have a chance to win it because the defense is so good.
Right.
They have an amazing running court. Let's not forget Darius Geis, a guy everyone's sitting there looking at like this could be the next top runner in the NFL or one of the next top runners in the NFL. Is going to be healthy this year. You got Adrian Peterson coming back. You got Chris Thompson coming back healthy. I would have liked to see more receivers in this team.
You also got Bryce Love, in my opinion, one of the underrated running backs out of this draft. And let's not forget, in my opinion, and I think you kind of agree with me too, Geis has been one of those guys, if he can stay healthy, might be even better than Leonard Fournette.
Exactly. Now, also, Sharif says Haskins will be the starter by week 1. I don't think it matters. The thing is, you don't need a guy that's going to throw 300 yards. You just need a guy who's going to take care of the football and who's going to get you about 250 yards passing. It'd be a lot easier if you had better receivers. The fact of the matter is, with what they've got, can either one of these guys work out and give them 250 to 275 yards a game? Because if they can, I think the Redskins are going to win 10, 11 games this year. This has been our sleeper team for 2 years now because of this defense. They've only gotten better. They've only improved on that side of the ball. They've got a great offensive line when they're healthy. They're never healthy, but they've got a great offensive line when they're healthy. Drew, this team stands to do spectacular things if they can find a gem at wide receiver.
Absolutely. Sharif is also saying Washington will win the NFC East, man.
They won't because there's 2 teams in there better than them.
That's huge, man.
But I think they'll be in the mix.
I think it's a possibility.
If they had a Carson Wentz, even if they had a Dak Prescott that you're like, this guy will take care of the ball for us, I would agree with you there. I think right now they're not quite sure enough at quarterback for me to sit there and say the Redskins are winning anything at this point. They could finish 3rd. They could finish 1st. I think the only sure thing in my mind right now is they're going to finish ahead of the Giants.
Brian, what's going on, man?
All right, let's move on, Drew. Let's talk about the Steelers at 14. Is this a shock for you? They've lost a lot of talent. I know a lot of people are going to be sitting there saying that's a little high.
It really is a shocker to me. But this is one of those teams where you go, where could you put them? Because you could drop them below 20, and you could put them at top 10. This is a team that literally kind of just jumps everywhere across the rankings of the NFL. Anyone that's doing rankings right now are really looking at this team and kind of going, what are you guys? Because their defense is questionable, but they're trying to fix that with draft picks and through free agency. You do lose Antonio Brown, but now it's time for Juju Smith to finally show himself and what he can do as the number 1 receiver. You kind of already lost Bell last year. You saw what you had in James Conner, but the question is, can James Conner...
Well, we saw some success.
Can we see James Conner in 16 games? That's your next big issue is can he stay healthy?
The biggest thing I'll point to is when guys like Nate Washington and Mike Wallace left, everyone was sitting there talking about the Steelers are taking a huge step back in the passing game. And then what happened? Antonio Brown came out of nowhere. He looks like a great receiver. Can they do it again? I don't know, but I think a lot of that credit needs to go to Big Ben as well. He has turned guys into the next big wide receiver. As long as they find a guy with a little bit of talent, I think the Steelers will be fine in that game. I think Juju Smith-Schuster might be that guy. I really do. I think he's a very talented receiver. I think as long as you have a guy like Big Ben throwing you the ball, they're going to have some success through the air. James Conner, because of that, is going to have some success on the ground. The question is going to be, what kind of defense do we get? And like you said, they've done things to improve. I think the Steelers at 14 is a respectable spot. They're not even the best in the division, at least in our power rankings right now. But
right.
I think the Steelers are in a much better spot than someone like the Ravens or the Bengals, because the Ravens, you look at their quarterback and you're like, we're not sure what we're going to get. We're not sure how effective he's going to be. You know Big Ben, as long as he can stay healthy, is going to be effective.
So Steve is saying we're way too high on Pitt. He's also saying Juju isn't a number 1. He was a phenomenal piece to complement AB. Man, I think when AB's out on the field, any receiver is a good piece sitting next
Yes.
to AB. But I think Juju Smith has shown last year that he was the number one target for Ben. That he was the guy that Ben relied on. It used to be AB. It used to be until AB started kind of throwing a fit on the sideline, saying, "Hey, I want more receptions and I want him in the in the end zone." AB wasn't happy. I mean, there's a lot of discord, and I think it's because Ben prefers to throw the ball to Juju over AB.
I agree with you. I definitely agree with you. And I think part of it, too, is just who's open. When everyone's focusing on Antonio Brown, you throw to the guy who's open. You don't sit there and try to force it into double and triple coverage. You just throw to the guy who's wide open every time, right?
And I definitely...
And there may be a bit of a step back this year. Maybe Juju Smith-Schuster doesn't put up the same numbers, but as long as he's drawing the attention and the next guy can step up, that's okay. Your passing offense is still going to work.
Oh, absolutely. And another reason why it's going to work is because you have a very underrated tight end in McDonald. That guy right there, I think he's definitely could be a very talented receiver, tight end. The only problem is Ben hasn't showed his want to really throw a lot to tight ends throughout his career.
Absolutely. Jeremy says losing Shazier has hurt the defense. I agree, and I think they kind of agree with you. They've kind of closed the book on Shazier, I think, with drafting a guy like Devin Bush and trading up to go take him. I know it's been the feel-good story that, yes, he's trying to get back into the NFL after that horrific spine injury he had.
Yeah.
But I think the Steelers are now kind of finally admitting that that's not going to happen. They're moving on. They're drafting a guy at number 10, I believe. They traded with the Denver Broncos to bring in Devin Bush. And they also made a big trade up in round 1 to do it. If you thought Shazier had any chance of coming back, you might hold out, or you might sit there and say, I'm not going to trade up for linebacker. They did. I think that means moving on. It's somebody else's defense now. And I hate to say that. You always hate to see injury knock a guy out, but I think Shazier, at least for all intents and purposes when it comes to the Steelers, probably won't be back anytime soon.
Steve also says, but that makes my point. He's going to be the number one. He's going to get all the attention. Can he hold up? Man, I'm going to tell you this right now. When the season started, everyone threw their attention to Antonio Brown. There's no doubt about it. But as the season started going along, all defenses, and I'm telling you, it's all throughout it. I've listened to it over and over. Their number one focus was stop Juju first because he's the chain mover. He's the guy that makes those catches when they need to move the chains. He's the guy that makes that dirty play that goes, they're moving the ball on. You know, Antonio Brown obviously is going to always be Antonio Brown. But one thing the Steelers always done for a very long time is they draft and coach wide receivers very well. They find wide receivers all over the draft, and they make them do very well in Pittsburgh. And then when they go off somewhere else, they don't do as well as they were doing in Pittsburgh. As far as I'm concerned, man, I get your point with Juju. Can he hold up? But I have no concerns with Big Ben throwing on the ball.
Now, Sharif's also saying the week 1 bids or the week 1 lines are already out in Vegas, and I agree with you, man. Football's king. Of course those lines are out, right?
Yeah.
I mean, we know everything we need to know about them. They've added most of the significant pieces they're going to. Yeah, the lines will change, but football's king. Of course those lines are out there already. Brian also disagrees with you. He says Big Ben will be using his tight ends a lot.
I think he should.
We haven't seen it a lot. I mean, obviously Vance McDonald played a little bit of a role with that big stiff arm he had and everything, and we've seen Heath Miller in the past, but he's kind of like Aaron Rodgers, where he prefers to get the ball to the sidelines. He prefers to get the ball in the hands of his wide receivers and let them run after the
or his running
play.
Backs.
I totally agree with you there.
Brian, I'm completely agreeing with you. I think it will be an increase this year because it's just so far we don't know what other receiver is going to be next to Juju. But like you said and I said, in history past, he doesn't like his tight ends.
Yep. Also, Sharif says, just really quick before we move on, week 1, the Titans at Browns. You know I had to talk about it. The Browns are favored 5.5 points. I'm going to say take the Titans there. They have a defense that's mostly returning. Pretty much everyone on this defense knows each other. It's week 1. The Browns have a lot of new pieces that are going to need to get used to each other. I'm going to say take the Titans and the points. Whether they win or not, I don't know, but I think the Titans keep that close and a low-scoring game as well. Definitely don't take that 45.5 over because the Titans aren't going to score enough points to get to that over. I'm definitely sitting there saying go with the Titans in that bet because even whether they win or lose, I think it's going to be close.
Yeah.
If this was week 10, I'd probably say take the Browns. But
John,
week 1,
yeah,
their offense is going to be clicking.
100%. John, Jesse James is a good tight end, but now he's a Detroit Lion. And I think
also, how much did he use it?
I think they're going to miss him.
He's kind of the heir apparent that everyone's like, oh, he's going to be that guy. And then Vance McDonald stiff arms one guy, and they're like, well, who's Jesse James? We don't need him anymore.
So, Matthew, don't answer your door on November 3rd just in case the Chiefs lose. I'm just telling you, don't answer your door. That's all I'm going to say. Don't answer it.
Pretty ominous. All right, let's. Steve says take the under with the Titans. That's always a safe bet. Let's move forward, Drew. Let's talk about the Falcons at 13 here.
Let's do it.
A couple spot slide for a team that we're really high on. It's just there's a lot of other teams that we're very high on here.
Yeah, this is a team that got riddled with injuries. This is a team that was in the Super Bowl 2 years ago. This is a team that a lot of people look at and go, there's too much talent on that roster to be a team that doesn't win 10 games or more. And this is a team that you literally can't sit there and bet against every time you play them. And we got to throw last year out of the water, because we all know the issues on defense was horrendous, and it made the offense be out on the field way too much and struggling to try to keep up. But when you got Matt Ryan, you got Julio Jones, you got Calvin Ridley going through and showing he could be someone to be worried about. I do concern a little bit about their run game after losing Tevin Coleman. Can Freeman stay healthy? Can he be the number one guy all the time? I know they've brought
except for last year. Last year, he had a pretty significant injury.
I know they brought in other people, but
right.
I mean, it is a little bit of concern. But I think they'll be perfectly fine. I mean, that offense is booming, and getting Deion Jones back and getting their safety, who I can't think of right now, it's huge for that defense.
And Keanu Neal was that the safety?
Yeah, it wasn't Neal. Yeah.
But going forward here, Steve says Calvin Ridley is going to be the next elite wide receiver. He could be as long as he's playing with Matt Ryan. I think he's kind of an underrated quarterback when it comes to making certain top-end wide receivers look good. Yes, Julio Jones is a beast. Everyone kind of admits that. But Mohamed Sanu didn't really do much for anyone before he went to Atlanta, and then all of a sudden he turns into a household name. Because of Matt Ryan, I think Calvin Ridley's in for the same treatment, and I think he's more talented than Sanu, so I agree with that.
Nate, also, I'm glad you could join us for a period. Go enjoy watching your Bucks, man.
Also, I have to sit there and kind of challenge Tom here, who says Cleveland is the play when you're talking about the Titans. Let me say this. They're probably playing without Kareem Hunt week 1, okay? And I hate to go back to this, Drew, but it's my Titans. I have to.
You're good, man.
He's challenging me here. They're probably going to be without Kareem Hunt week 1. It'll be week 1 for Odell Beckham in the offense. Yes, they have Jarvis Landry, but they have changes in the offensive line with guys like Zeitler as well. Bet on the team not being 100% firing on all cylinders. Bet on the Browns having some learning to do and getting used to all these new pieces before you bet on a team like the Titans before you bet on them beating a team by more than 5.5, like a team like the Titans, who are bringing basically everybody back. Chemistry over overall talent, at least in week 1.
I see your concern, and to be honest with you, I think the guy that's holding the rock, it makes a difference here. I think it's a Baker Mayfield game. And we all know you have concerns with Marcus Mariota. If it's Ryan Tannehill, so be it. But when you look at quarterback, you look at the guy that gets the open receiver, that doesn't turn the ball over, that can sense pressure, which Mariota's struggled with, you got to give it to Baker Mayfield. And not to knock the Titans by any means, but I got the Browns winning this game.
At 5.5?
5.5.
Okay. All right. Moving forward, let's talk about the Falcons just a little bit more before we move on. A 2-point slide here for them. We had them all the way up at 11 going into the offseason. Do you think it was because they won an all offensive line? I mean, I think we both agree that was a need. They didn't go for the sexy picks. They didn't go for anything like a receiver or a running back like we've seen them do in years past, or a pass rusher that you're like, this guy can make an instant impact. We get to see him. We get to salivate whenever they make a play. They went for kind of the dirty work. Those offensive linemen we don't see a lot. Do you think that's kind of playing a little bit into our ranking, or do you see this as more of a team that has to prove it again?
I think they are in that realm of have to prove it again, but I think as unsexy as these picks are, it's the right move. It's you're guarding your main piece, and that's Matt Ryan. They've Matt Ryan is their future.
Live and die by him.
Live and die by it. And when that defense was struggling because they lost pieces, their offense couldn't keep up. And one of the reasons their offense couldn't keep up because their offensive line struggled protecting Matt Ryan and didn't allow him enough time in the pocket.
And it went from a strength to a weakness, so credit to them for addressing it right away. Now also, Corey says, call me crazy, but I really think the Chargers will have the number 1 defense next season. A lot of the pieces are still there, and we drafted some good players on defense. I agree. I'm not going to say they're going to be number 1, but I think they're going to be top 7. I think they're going to be very good.
Not to be any spoilers in this show tonight, but we definitely think very highly of the Chargers.
And this is a Chiefs fan sitting there saying that the Chargers are good. So stay tuned for that. But let's move forward, Drew. Let's talk about the Packers next, because this, to me, is the big mover this year. 8 spots higher than we had them going into the offseason. This is me.
This is the team you had to talk me into, yeah.
A lot of this is me. What have the Packers been missing since Aaron Rodgers won his last Super Bowl?
Defense.
Exactly. So what did they go and do? They went and bought a defense. And they bought good players.
And they bought great players.
Exactly. Adrian Amos, who's not the number 1 name on this list, but I'm naming him first.
No, before you go into your list, not only did they buy good players, they bought underrated, motor always constantly going players. Is what you need to start creating a great defense with.
Multiple defensive ends. They brought in Preston Smith from the Redskins. They brought in Zadarius Smith from the Ravens. They drafted Rashawn Gary. This defensive end should at the very least be able to pressure teams like the Bears, who are looking to throw a little bit more, like the Vikings, who are looking to throw a little bit more than in years past. So the defensive end position has never been better, I think, in Green Bay, at least probably since 2012. They have focused exactly on their biggest weakness. They drafted a bunch of cornerbacks the year before. This defense, I'm not going to say it's going to be a top 10, but if they go from being somewhere in the 20s to somewhere in the teens, Drew.
What's the one thing they always say about Aaron Rodgers? He just needs a good defense. Doesn't have to be the best. He just needs to have a good defense.
I totally agree with you, man, and they absolutely... I'm not going to say they're going to be good, but if they give you top 15 and they go from giving up 40 points a game to 28 or 30, that's going to be enough for them to win games. When you have a quarterback like Aaron Rodgers, he's going to be able to compete in those games.
I'm going to have to shoot a little bit down from that points. I think it needs to be anywhere from like 15 to 20 points a game, but that's going to put them up there closer to 10, ranking like, the 10 best defenses. But now you have the players. You have the draft picks that could possibly get you there, even though we're not huge on the draft picks with Sean Gary.
This might be the team.
Go ahead. It makes sense that this team could be that way. But this is the reason why I fought you. The reason why I was like, I don't know if I could put them at 11 is those weapons. We talked about this, that they went out and drafted all those receivers.
You're changing seats with me here, Drew, because I was the one sitting there saying they need weapons, and you're like, nah, they'll be all right.
The thing is all these receivers that they went out and drafted, and some of them, like Geronimo Allison, that I like, but, they haven't panned out just yet. So they're putting all their chips in and saying, hey, when we drafted all those guys, we knew exactly what we were doing. Even though it's a new coaching staff, we're going to make these pieces work.
And they have about 1.5 receivers. Devontae Adams, I think we all agree, is a great number one wide receiver. He's going to be a great receiver regardless. He's not the guy you want to leave out there alone on an island because I think he can be taken out of games. But Geronimo Allison, I think they're hoping he can become that number 2. And I like Geronimo Allison. I want to see a full season. I want to see a full season of Geronimo Allison making things happen. Beyond that, I think guys like Equiminius St. Brown are pretty much just a wash. They're just guys. They're not anything special, even with Aaron Rodgers, which is kind of concerning. But I will say this. You don't necessarily need to be the best offense in the league now because this defense is going to be a little bit better. If they play well with Aaron Rodgers and then you have this defense playing okay with all these new additions, this is going to be a formidable team in the NFC. I'm not even saying playoffs, but this is going to be a team that you need to watch out for, and you're going to circle on the calendar like, okay, we need to focus in this game.
Yeah. Jeremy said the pack may be back. It's definitely a possibility. Corey also said there are 3 quarterbacks that he won't bet against. That's Brady, Rodgers, and Breeze. Man, I'm going to add one more to your list. That's Mahomes.
A little early for that, but I agree. If this wasn't just an aberration, if this was the norm this past season, yeah, he's on the list. I want to see more. That's it. That's all I can say. I want to see more. He's just young. So going forward, we'll talk about that. But at least for right now, I think the Packers are absolutely a team that it's always hard to bet against when you have a healthy Aaron Rodgers. The question is, can he stay healthy? Let's talk about number 10, though, Drew. Let's talk about the Cleveland Browns, a team that we really struggled on where to put them.
It was a team,
if you listen to them, they're going to be the next Patriots, right? Odell Beckham, he's skipping the one Super Bowl. He's like, we're going to win 5.
Multiple championships. This is mine. This is my ranking. This is one where I was like, dude, we cannot put them anywhere.
Thank you, Jeremy.
We cannot put them anywhere outside the top 10. They've done too much in free agency, too much in their drafts that you can sit there and go, you can't put this team in the top 10 on paper. Because remember, this is ranking. This is ranking right here is all based off of paper. This is all based on what they've done through free agency. This is all based on what they've done through draft. This is a little bit of what they did last year. And, my biggest question mark is what it's always been is what can Freddie Kitchens do when he has everything on his shoulders? I mean, it's going to be an issue.
So you have a first-time head coach in Freddie Kitchens. Usually when you have first-time head coaches, they wind up making clock management errors. They wind up making little mistakes that can cost the team games, whether it's use of timeouts, whether it's use of challenges. There's always seems to be something that comes up with rookie head coaches. So I think that's kind of a minus in the Browns column right now. He needs more experience. They could have gone with another guy. They could have gone with Greg Williams, who's been around the block. They didn't. They went aggressive and went with Tony Kitchens instead. Freddie Kitchens, I'm sorry. I don't know why I always have Tony in my mind. I've done that before. But I think that's kind of a minus for them going forward. The other thing is chemistry. Yeah, you brought in all these pieces. We've crowned off-season champions like the Eagles and the Jaguars in the past and said this is going to be the team to beat in the NFL. And then they win 6 games? 7 games? 4 games if you're the Jaguars? So I think Cleveland has a bit of that element to them too. But I get it. They have all the. If we're playing Madden, this is the team to beat, right? You got Kareem Hunt, you got Jarvis Landry and Odell Beckham all playing together. You have Baker Mayfield at quarterback, who's looking pretty good.
Very accurate quarterback. Yeah.
My only thing with the Browns is usually when you sit there and crown them and say they're going to be the team to beat, they usually are not, and they come out not firing out on all cylinders. I know I've used that expression before, but they come out a little bit soft. They come out thinking, well, we're going to dominate, we're going to be fine, and then the hungry team comes in and beats them. So that, to me, is going to be a bit of a downside for the Browns. You talked them up a little bit. I had them at 12. You talked me into 10 for the show.
I did.
This is still a six-spot move upward, simply by trading for Odell Beckham and taking Greedy Williams. I think is also an underrated move.
Moving for Kareem Hunt.
The biggest negative I can say: Steve Wilks, their new defensive coordinator, formerly of the Cardinals, plays a lot of zone coverage. He has a lot of man coverage guys. Is he going to change his scheme to fit what the Browns can do well, or is he going to try to fit a square peg in a round hole and try to run zone coverage with that? I think that's a big issue because Greedy Williams and also Denzel Ward are both two of the best, I believe, man coverage guys that are going to be in the NFL. Are they going to switch to Steve Wilks' zone coverage scheme, or are they going to try to let these guys go man-to-man and match up?
They're going to have to let them go man-to-man.
That's what you and I would say. But
you don't take away their strength. It makes
some
no
of these
sense.
coaches go into this saying, this is what I do, this is what works, and this is what we're going to do. So that's a question for me.
And you're right. And that's what Sharice's kind of getting at. The Browns, number one, horrible ownership. Number two, horrible front office. And number three, who's the coach, which are equal failures. That's it. If you bring in someone like Wilks and he doesn't match up your roster, your depth chart, and his scheme doesn't match properly, that's an issue with the front office. That's an issue with the ownership of this of the company, of this team, that's not putting him in the right position to succeed.
Steve, we also had Buffalo ranked all the way down at 22, a -1 from where they entered the offseason. Not necessarily because we hated what they did, but because we feel like other teams were a little more aggressive and upgraded a little bit better.
They have a lot to improve, even though we like what we see on paper and what they've done. They have a lot to prove.
Exactly. They didn't make those big leaps forward. They went more conservative. We'll see what happens with Buffalo. Brian also says Cleveland players' egos will be the possible downfall of the team, and I kind of agree with him here. Again, you go into the season thinking you're going to be the it team. You're going to be winning a lot of games. You come in and you're not the hungry dog. Usually it's the hungry dog who eats, Drew. And those teams like Jacksonville come and steal games against you. Teams like Houston this year, where nobody's talking about them, but they're playing hard every week because nobody counts on them. Those are the teams that win in the NFL because the margins are very, very slim.
Man, it happens, and I completely get it. I mean, Sharif should know about some personalities on defense and players, with being a Ravens fan with Ray Lewis and you know those crazy guys and Steve Smith and all them. I mean, I get it. I get why you would say that, Brian. It makes complete sense. But you know what? That's what a lot of teams are looking for. They want these players that feel comfortable with who they are. They want these players that know that they could do better than everybody else. Because sometimes having that confidence, even though it's an equal playing field, that confidence sometimes will push them over the edge to be better.
And Steve also says the first time Baker overthrows Odell is going to be much-watched TV. Look, it's going to happen. We're going to see it. I think Odell gets a bad rap, but going forward, Drew, I think the Browns are still going to be a team that's formidable. I think they win 9 or 10 games. I'm not even going to sit there and say they win the division, but if I had to pick one of these squads out of the team, or out of that entire division that I absolutely like, and I say they've done all the right things, it's the Browns, right? When you look at the trades, when you look at signing Kareem Hunt for no money, when you look at bringing on guys like Olivier Vernon to help that pass rush, they've done all the right things. They've checked all the boxes, except for offensive line. Trading away Zeitler, I'm not crazy about that, but when you look at what you got, it had to be done.
Had to be done. Sharif, I hope you can forgive us for putting your Ravens at 19, man.
Hey, it's just 22, or yeah, sorry.
19.
No, it's 19 for them.
Sorry, man.
Hey, I hate Lamar Jackson. What can I say?
You
know me. You can put this one on me.
No,
Drew,
it wasn't even you, because we talked about it and we said, it's great that they're I said this. I said it's great they were changing the receiving core. That's a great thing, but is that what they should focus on when they lost those pieces on defense?
Yeah, I mean, and that's your strength, right? And you minused a lot of pieces on defense. You're going to need some other guys to step out right away.
I love the Earl Thomas signing. That's amazing in my opinion.
But you lost to Darius Smith.
My opinion,
you lost
that's an
CJ
upgrade.
Mosley. Yeah, I mean, you lost a lot of guys that were absolute staples of this defense. Our question is, where are you now? Like, what happens from here? Corey also says he sees the Browns going 8-8. That's possible, but I absolutely believe that they have a chance with this division being as weak as it is to make an impact. So, I don't know. Look, Sharif, as for the Browns winning the division, man, some people haven't won in the Super Bowl. I don't think it's that far out there, right?
That's true.
And I agree with you. I'm not saying they're going to necessarily do it, but I absolutely have to say they're the favorite when you look at this roster. Pound for pound, this team has better positions at everything except maybe quarterback. And even then, they're probably sitting at second with Baker Mayfield, right? Behind Ben Roethlisberger. That's where I would put it.
Yeah, but there's no doubt about it. The arrow is up for Baker Mayfield, at least in my opinion.
Oh, I think in everybody's opinion, it's only trending upward from here.
Gregory, I'm glad that we could rank your Browns in the top 10 this year. It's been a long time since the Browns could be
Drew
ranked
for that
that
one.
high.
Thank Drew for that one because he fought. I had him at 12, which is still pretty good when you think about it, all scheme of things. That's a playoff team. Drew convinced me, hey, they got to be in the top 10, right?
They had
when you add all these, when you add Kareem Hunt, when you add Odell Beckham, the potential.
Grady Williams.
It's all there. Absolutely.
Have to do it.
Let's talk about 9. Who comes next, Drew? It's the Cowboys. How do you feel about that?
This is a
Cowboys fans are going to be interested.
This is a team you had to talk me into getting above that 10 mark. I absolutely love.
They were a playoff team.
I absolutely love. So were the Ravens. So were
the Ravens
Seahawks.
took it in the shorts. I'm sorry.
So were the Seahawks, and we have them way below this mark.
They have a defense, Drew.
I absolutely love Zeke Elliott. I love the way he plays. I just don't know how long he could play for. I like the Amari Cooper move. That was the right move to make. You needed a number one receiver because Alan Hearns was not working out for you, regardless of how much they liked Cole Beasley. Cole Beasley. He is not a number one receiver by any means, and this defense is absolutely stellar. Those stud linebacks in Smith and
Vander Esch. Yes.
Esch is just those guys are studs.
You got to say the whole thing, Vander Esch, because it's like two last
Leighton
names.
Vander Esch.
It's like hyphenated, but
I don't
no
care.
hyphen.
Juju Smith will always be Juju Smith instead of Schuster Smith. I don't care. It's
Smith Schuster.
Whatever it is. Exactly. That's why I'm moving on in my life. We're moving on, guys. Everyone understands me. We'll move on from that. I love that. I love those linebackers. Those guys are literally the future of the linebacking core in the NFL. That is literally what teams are looking for in linebackers now. People that can move sideline to sideline, that can literally attack the offensive line and get to the quarterback and drop back into pass coverage and create interceptions and turnovers. They got a huge future on that defense. And after signing DeMarcus Lawrence, that defense alone puts the Cowboys that high on this ranking.
Now, everyone's sitting there saying Cowboy. When I say everyone, I mean Steve and Sharif are saying in the comments, how do you have the Cowboys at 9? Let me say this. They have a great defense, okay? This is an underrated defense. Nobody talks about them like the Ravens, but they play like it. These guys on defense are absolutely fantastic, and they did not subtract like teams like the Ravens and the Seahawks did, right? I mean, if you look at the way the Ravens have lost pieces, the Cowboys haven't had that. They franchised their edge rusher,
DeMarcus
Lawrence. Exactly. They managed to find a way to keep everybody around and keep everybody happy. I think that's why they stay where they are. I mean, they took one spot back, right? When the offseason started, we had them at number 8. When the offseason ends, we have them at 9 because we didn't love their draft per se. We didn't love some of these other things they've done. They didn't really add that next big piece, but they kept everybody around. Exactly. They kept everybody around, and that's important too. Chemistry is a big thing in the NFL. People don't talk about that. They run the ball well. They block well in the offensive line, and they probably will block better next year if all these high-dollar offensive linemen stay healthy.
Yeah.
And they play really good defense. When you do that, you're going to have some success in there. I get it. Dak Prescott's kind of a minus, but he's been better with guys like Amari Cooper. Their biggest loss this year, Drew, was Cole Beasley. Yeah. And I don't think anyone's sitting here saying Cole Beasley is the guy to have, the receiver to have in the NFL. He's replaceable. Maybe Randall Cobb does it. Maybe they look at someone else. I think they drafted Deebo Samuel. I'm kind of going from memory here. I believe they drafted Deebo Samuel to play from that slot position. I think this is one of those spots that the Cowboys, even though you may not like it, even though it may be ugly football, they're going to get the job done. They're going to win 9 or 10 games. They get to play the Giants twice. They get to play the Redskins, who may not be any good with no quarterback.
It's a possibility.
I look at this team, and I'm like, they're still going to be a threat to make the playoffs and make an impact in the NFL.
Sonny, just let you know we had your Bucks at 31. That's a lot to believe in when there's not a whole lot to believe in.
Well, Sonny, I know we talked about this in one of the other posts, man, but this is just another opportunity for the Buccaneers to have drafted the Josh Allen out of Kentucky, the edge rusher. They passed on him, and I think this is almost like karma for letting that good of a guy slip past you, losing your 12.5 sack outside or defensive end in JPP. Look, the Buccaneers, they're my second favorite team in the NFC. I think they're the team I root for. They still don't have it, man. They're all the way down at the bottom. If you want to watch that, we have it in our last episode where we went pretty far in depth on them.
He he said he's sad about what happened to JPP, or he's pissed about what happened to JPP.
Sucks for him.
And George says JPP just needs to stay home. I guess he's
Is this
kind
a
of
career?
saying that retirement thing.
Is this a career? I mean, I know he's saying he kind of wants to go back. He's getting multiple opinions on his broken neck. If you haven't heard, he was in a car wreck, broke his neck, and probably will miss all of 2019. Look, Drew, we've seen it happen before, right? When he blew off all those fingers in that firework accident, I was like, that's it, right? You don't have defensive ends play with a club on it. I mean, I know some of them do when they break their hands, but you don't want a club all the time.
It's not about the strength coming down. It's about the gripping power. It's about gripping onto a lineman and shoving him down. Or a lot of times with defensive ends, because the running back's going on that edge, sometimes it's a one-arm tackle. And the question is, does three fingers have enough strength? This is literally just a series of bad luck for this gentleman. All off the field issues. I'm with you guys. I think he should retire.
Some of them are self-inflicted. Some of them are, I mean, it's a car wreck. How much can you control that? Probably not a whole lot.
Right.
Unless he was doing something stupid, but I haven't heard any of that. I think a lot of this could be categorized as bad luck. I think he comes back. I think he has the will and the desire. Like I said, when he blew off all those fingers, I thought that was it for him. He came back and surprised everybody and was okay. I'm not going to say he was great. I know he had 12.5 sacks last year, but if you listen to everybody else, they're sitting there saying it wasn't all him. It was a lot of other guys in this defense. I got to sit there and look at it and say, I think he's going to have the will to come back. Couple more things before we move on. Corey says the Eagles and the Cowboys are going to be the teams to beat, and it's a two-horse race in the NFC East. I think you're forgetting about the Redskins. We're sleeping on the team that, if nothing happened to Alex Smith last year, probably beats maybe both of those teams out.
Both of those teams, yeah.
They could have been 10-6.
You got to remember they were 6-2 or 7-2 before Alex Smith went down.
Absolutely. So I totally agree with you there, man. Those are two teams that are really good, but if they get any kind of quarterback, either out of Dwayne Haskins or out of Case Keenum, I think the Redskins are going to be scary again.
Sharif, I know that you think we're crazy, man, and we're just sipping on what we normally sip on. That's beer. But, man, I'm telling you, that defense is good.
Look, they're the Ravens, but better.
Yeah.
I'm kidding, Sharif.
That defense is good, though, man, and they didn't lose any pieces. Like I said, I want to give the Ravens a higher ranking, but they lost too much, man.
You need a
John
CJ
Harbaugh's
Mosley.
going to have to sit there and prove to me that he can create any defense at any players. But what you lost this year, this offseason, you didn't replace enough.
You lost a middle linebacker, you lost a defensive end, and you drafted
said it
two
earlier
receivers. Yeah.
in comments that their draft was absolutely horrible. You nailed it, man. They didn't draft towards their needs. I don't dislike the wide receivers. It just doesn't make any sense. You run the ball. You need that defense to make the field short.
If this was like a sixth offensive lineman to put on the field, I'd be like, yeah, go Ravens, right? They're going to their strength. They're all in. But I got to sit there and say this. The Cowboys know what they're trying to do, they're going to stick with it.
He also said Dak can't throw.
You know who else can't throw? Lamar Jackson. That's why we have him at 19.
He proved you
if
wrong,
you had to
man.
If you had to pick one of them, who would you take? Dak Prescott, right? If you're like, I have
right
one
now.
game to win,
right
and
now.
it needs to be through the air, I'm taking Dak Prescott.
Yeah.
Look,
But
I don't think he's great. It's going to ruin the team when they give him too much money. But for right now, they have the defense. They have Amari Cooper, who's going to make an impact. Hopefully, either Randall Cobb or Deebo Samuel can make an impact in wide receiver. It's the second. And all of a sudden, we're talking about a pretty good team because you got Zeke Elliott as well. This team is built really well. Even if they don't have the best quarterback, they have a great built team.
That's exactly what I
And that's how you win in the NFL. Everyone talks about Brady winning all these Super Bowls. Guess what? He's had really good defenses pretty much all the way through when it comes to scoring. I mean, you don't do it alone. You really don't. So I look at this team, Drew. The Cowboys have a good team. Even if you don't like the quarterback, they have a really good team. All right. Sorry, I went on a rant there.
Steve said exactly why Baltimore should be below Buffalo. Man, I can't do it. I'm telling you right now, as much as I like what Buffalo has done throughout the free agency, and it moves them up because honestly,
it should move them up. They took a step back. They took one spot back.
Well, you know what? To be honest with you, they should be lower than that because guess what? They didn't make the playoffs.
And that's true.
Guess what?
I mean, they won, what was it, 6 games?
They played in a division that they're not going to win.
No.
And so when you look at the Ravens can win that defense or win that division. That is a possibility for the Ravens. That is a winnable division for the Ravens. We all know Buffalo is not going to win that division. So that means they're going to make the playoffs through a wild card position. And you're going to sit there and tell me that the Chargers and the Chiefs and the Steelers and the Browns and the Ravens are not going to have more wins than what the Bills are going to do? Man, you can't say that. That's the reason why we had the Ravens above the Bills. As much as I like what the Bills are doing for the future, I think it's absolutely the right move. We can't rank them above them.
And also, John says the Cowboys will make it to at least the NFC Championship. And I will say this. maybe slow your roll just a little bit, John. I like the Cowboys. I like what they've done, but we have 4 NFC teams ahead of them in our power rankings. I'm not going to sit there and tell you that they're the best team in the NFL. I like what they've done, and I'm kind of with Sharif here saying Jerry Jones will find a way to mess it up. And I think that comes when you pay Dak Prescott like he's Russell Wilson and you pay Ezekiel Elliott like he's Todd Gurley.
Right.
But for right now, the Cowboys are in a good spot. I think at number 9, they're a team that's probably going to make the playoffs and then have some struggles maybe once they get there. I think they're a good team. I don't know if they're necessarily great just yet.
Yep, I'm right there with you.
Let's talk about 8, though, Drew.
Let's do it.
The team that nobody knows where to rank. Because you look at them, they should be bad, but Andrew Luck somehow makes them good. It's the Indianapolis Colts.
A team that's going to be good for a long time. They have plenty of money.
Yeah, as long as Andrew Luck's there,
I
right?
think he'll be fine. He'll be there for a while. I think it's a team that has plenty of money to sign all their free agents when it comes up to it. They didn't spend any of their money. They might take a fine for it because they're not spending it. I don't really know how that all works out because I never really looked into it too much because this might be one of the first teams to ever do it if they don't start spending some of this money. But they have enough money to keep all the people they want to keep. And their draft was a decent draft for what they had. And I like it. I think everything that they have there is to grow on. It was a surprise team for sure for last year.
It's still a spot backwards, though.
But
again, we had them 7 going into the offseason. I think the biggest kind of move here, even though they added someone like Justin Houston to this defense, you had $100 million, and you had a lot of good free agents. Guys like C.J. Mosley, guys like Earl Thomas that you could assign to this team that even if you don't like Antonio Brown's attitude, even if you don't like Le'Veon Bell's attitude, you can bring in team character guys like C.J. Mosley and just pay them a lot of money and make it happen, but they did not do it. When you have $100 million, that's okay to do. Yeah. If they would have brought in one of those guys, we'd be talking about this might be a top 5 team in the NFL. The problem is they stayed a little too conservative. There is a time where it's okay to open the wallet. This was one of those times. I think the Colts were too conservative for their own good here. Look, you made it all the way into the second round of the playoffs, and I get it. The Chiefs kind of blew you out a little bit. So what do? You get better from there, and you go challenge a team like the Chiefs. They didn't really try to do that. To them, they were kind of just like, look, we've got some good things going. We've got some players we believe in. Let's use our draft picks. If you're up against the cap, I love that strategy, but right now they're not up against the cap. Way too conservative in a year where they should be spending the money to try to win one of these championships.
But I do like what they're doing. If this is their plan, and I don't know because I don't sit in the front office, I don't sit in those meetings. If it's to save money, to sign all these players, let's not forget this is a playoff team. They're going to lose some of these free agents that are going to want a lot of money. And one thing to keep them there is to save money in your cap space to sign them. I don't know if it's the right move.
But I don't know that they do. Who on this defense?
Well, there's no doubt about the need.
Darius Leonard. Okay, but you just drafted him. So you've got 3 more years. Even though he's a second-round pick, you have 3 more years with Darius Leonard on super cheap deals. I mean, who on this defense are you looking at
Andrew Luck
I can't
might
afford to let him go?
money.
Does he strike you as that guy?
T.Y. Hilton might want more money. What about Jack Doyle or Eric Ebron? Those guys don't have long contracts. I'm just putting it out. What about offensive linemen besides the ones they drafted?
Well, here's the thing. Either one of those guys, Eric Ebron, Jack Doyle, they're still replaceable. I think they're very good tight ends, but I'm not going to sit there and they're not Travis Kelce. They're not Rob Gronkowski.
And
guys that you can't make it work with.
And I absolutely get that. But when those
they made Dwayne Allen look like a stud.
When those pieces work, even though they aren't your big fancy names, the names that everyone knows in every household, but they work and they work perfect, you don't usually want to back off that.
Well, yeah, but if you're Chris Ballard, you don't pay him either. You sit there and say, well, we're conservative. We don't pay anyone outside whatever we value them at. Well, you let those guys walk and you bring somebody else. But you should.
He's going to have to pay.
I don't know, Drew.
You can't keep paying a fine for not getting closer to the cap.
And I agree with you there, man. But look, I look at the Colts. Again, this might be potential wasted because I think everyone agrees they're that team that's moving all the way up. The reason we have them at number 8 is because they did not sit there and go out, and they could have won free agency.
They could have got Le'Veon Bell.
They could have got Le'Veon Bell, and we're talking about Andrew Luck and that offensive line playing with Le'Veon Bell.
I would have put them up there around 3.
Exactly.
There's no doubt about it.
They could have got Antonio Brown. They could have traded for him. They could have brought on C.J. Mosley and Earl Thomas. Then we'd be talking about, man, you have Darius Leonard, C.J. Mosley, Justin Houston, and Earl Thomas all in a defense together. The Chiefs better watch out. That would really be what we were saying. But instead they're like, we'll sign Justin Houston on like a discount contract because the Chiefs are paying some of that money, and everything else kind of go in our pocket. They could have brought on a guy like Tyrell Williams and said, we're going to have the best wide receiving core in the NFL. Brought on Tyrell Williams. You already have T.Y. Hilton. I get it. There's too many T's in the wide receiver room. And then drafted like they did, and we'd be talking about the Colts having one of the best receiving rooms. They didn't do anything to be special. And when you have that money, you do something to be special.
You would usually see that.
Let's talk about the next team, Drew.
Let's do it.
Let's talk about the Rams, man, because, again, another 2-spot drop here. We're seeing a lot of these teams move back like a spot or two. Who's our big riser? Can't wait to see that.
It's coming up. This is a team that, Super Bowl slump. It exists. There's no doubt about it. Teams besides literally the Patriots have a hard time bouncing back in and getting the Super Bowl. I definitely see this team as a playoff team. I think they will get a little bit better when Cooper Kupp comes back. I think he'll probably win the Comeback Player of the Year next year, more than likely, just because of how much Jared Goff absolutely adores that guy with throwing the ball to him constantly. But you're gonna look at a little drops off. Ndamukong Suh, if he finds his way back there, that'd be a great thing. But they did lose him. Not that he's put up great numbers, but he definitely allowed Aaron Donald to see a little bit more one-on-one coverage instead of getting all the double teams. You also have Todd Gurley's issues with his knees. There's arthritis in his knees. What's the snap count on this guy? Do you keep playing him until he drops, kind of like what Jerry Jones is doing to Zeke Elliott, or do you hold him back a little bit and let it go?
There's a huge difference here. I don't want you to go too much wrong.
Before you go off, but he's shown if you do that, he does not put out the plays like he does if you keep feeding him the rock.
Exactly, and nobody would. I don't think there's a human being alive that could take 400 snaps in the NFL and sit there and say, I'm just as fresh as snap number 1. So I agree with you there. But my other point here is there's a difference between these two guys. The Rams have paid Todd Gurley. Jerry Jones hasn't paid Ezekiel Elliott, so it's okay to run the wheels off that guy, especially if you're not going to bring him back. What you can't do is pay him a lot of money and say, we're going to pound this dude into the ground when you've given him a 4 or 5 year contract. That's where the issue comes in. So I agree with you. I think the Rams take a step back. I worry about their front seven outside of Aaron Donald and maybe Michael Brockers. I don't think there's anyone on there that's that special. Dante Fowler, I know they're talking about keeping him around.
They did keep him. They signed him for a contract.
He's not potentially special, I don't believe. Yeah. I know he went high for Jacksonville last year, but he's been he hasn't lived up to his draft pick. I look at the rest of this front seven, and I'm like, they're not that special. I know they brought in Aqib Talib. I know they brought in Marcus Peters as well to play corner for them, but age is starting to catch up with those guys. They're starting to slow down a little bit. I know they brought in Eric Weddle, another guy that don't tell me age is not caught up with him. I look at the Rams. They're going to take a step back. Fatigue hit this team hard towards the back end of the season last year. I think it might hit a little bit earlier because you're getting older in the secondary and older in other positions where you probably need to start getting younger.
I like what George says here. He says that team's morale is my biggest question, man. I agree with you. I completely agree with you. I think it's going to literally ride and die off of Aaron Donald. If Aaron Donald can keep on going and doing what he's doing so far in his career, I think everyone's going to ride off that. When you find your best player and he goes out there and does everything he can, gets another 20-sack season, I don't see this team's morale having an issue. But let's just say something happens with Aaron Donald. Let's just say he loses a step. The double teams he's not as good as he was because he's getting double teamed and Suh's not next to him, which I highly doubt any of that's going to happen. I'm just throwing out a point here. I think you see the morale of this team drop.
Also, Steve's kind of with us. He says the Rams take a decent step back. I think we kind of agree. We said 2-point drop. They went from 5 going into the offseason to 7. I still think they're a very good team. They're still going to give teams kind of a struggle. But I look at this, Drew, and I can't sit there and tell you they're going to replicate off of last year and make a Super Bowl or anything. Now, also, Bobby says the Berg is the city of champions. Well, we have them all the way down at 14. Does Pittsburgh become a champion again? Can they win a Super Bowl this year with the team looking the way it does?
It's going to be tough, man. Bobby, I hope it works out for you, man. Good luck.
Street also says, watch out for the 49ers, who we all have all the way down at 21. Look, to us, is Jimmy G giving you 16 games.
That's it.
Yeah, if he plays, everyone's saying, look out for the 49ers. Yeah. If he doesn't, 4, 5, 6 wins. I mean, Nick Mullins looked okay, but you can't sit there and tell me you're winning anything with Nick Mullins. Steve also says the NFC West is going to be a lot closer than last year. Maybe. I don't know. The Seahawks, minor step back. 49ers, if Jimmy G plays all year, sure, but if not, they're in the same kind of bottom tiers. Cardinals, I don't see them becoming an 8, 9, 10 win team season 1. I think they're probably another season away from being really good. This might be the Rams' division by default.
Yeah.
All right, Drew, let's talk about number 6 because I'm ready to shock some people.
All right, let's do it.
The New England Patriots at 6 for us, 4 spots below where we had them going into the offseason. And when I look at this, Drew, look, man, let me sell it because I think I even had to do a little convincing on you here. They lost Rob Gronkowski, who everyone's going to say, yes, he was injured. I agree, but he came up big for them in big moments, especially towards the end of the season. They didn't really address their wide receiver position as well as we'd like to see. Signing a guy like Demaryius Thomas in free agency, while he may be cheap, I don't know how much Demaryius Thomas has left in the tank. I get it. They spent their first-round pick on N'Keal Harry. a good addition, but in year one, is he going to be able to come in and be that Patriot dominant type of player? I think that remains to be seen. They lost guys like Trent Brown, which even though I agree he should not have been paid that much money to play left tackle for them, is going to move on to the Oakland Raiders as well. And then we're talking about them also losing defensive end Trey Flowers, which this guy was the heart and soul of the front seven for the team. You look at it, there was probably one, maybe 1.5 guys in this front seven that you're like is a major plus, and Trey Flowers is one of them. So maybe Dante Hightower is another guy you can point to and sit there and say he was doing a really good job last year. Except for that, I mean, Trey Flowers was the heart and soul of this defense. I know they've done a decent job of replacing him with a guy like Michael Bennett, but Michael Bennett's 33. You just gave up a 25-year-old who was doing it all by himself and brought in a 33-year-old and said, hey, man, here are the keys. It's all on you. I worry about them. I know they drafted Chase Winovich, but again, it can take guys time to hit the ground running. Is this the year we see the Patriots actually take a step back?
Nathan, I'm glad you could join us, man. Every time you sit there and say the Patriots are taking a step back, they don't. Let's not be all unrealistic here. They drafted really well.
This is still their division too. We're not sitting there saying that.
They're still gonna.
Sorry, Steve. I know you just said we like us, but this is still their division to lose.
They drafted really well. They had a great draft. I think they picked everything they should have done in the right positions at the time they should have done it. I like all their late round picks as well. And as you said, this is their division. They're going to be in the playoffs. There's no doubt about it. This is it. I mean, that's why when you sit there and put the Patriots at 6 instead of 2, it's because you still believe them, or we still believe them to be a playoff team. The only way that doesn't happen is if Tom Brady gets hurt. And that is an issue now.
Well, they drafted Jared Stidham.
Wynn is looking like he might not be completely healthy. They brought in a veteran at tackle, and I cannot remember his name right now. It just happened recently.
And they drafted Yadni Kajus, and they drafted Hjolte Froholt, two of the hardest names to say out of this draft. I feel like they were doing it on purpose.
They're
to try to shore up this offensive line.
They're worried about it. There's no doubt about it. That's a lot of focus on that offensive line. That to sign a veteran is weird for the Patriots to do, usually this late during the offseason. I would have concern there. But that being said, all said and done, like I said, Patriots will be in the playoffs, and even though we dropped them 4 spots, we all probably know right now they're going to be in the AFC Championship game.
Little off topic, but Bobby says, is Le'Veon going to show up for the Jets? Look, man, I'm going to say pump the brakes. Don't worry about it. These are voluntary workouts. Some guys like working with their personal trainers instead of working with the team guys. I'm not going to say it's. I think I said this last episode, but it's not time to hit the panic button just yet on Le'Veon Bell and the Jets. It's not a good sign, but it's not a bad one either. Like I said, some guys just like working out on their own. I wouldn't panic just yet. He'll show up when it's time to show up.
Yeah. Steve says his father time get to Brady this year, man. To be honest with you, before Jake answers this, I think he got to him last year. I think there was a lot of signs of him declining last year. But the thing about it is he plays with Belichick, which is literally one of the great offensive minds not even offense, defense and offense, NFL minds we've ever seen. I mean, as much as I don't like Belichick, guys, let's be completely honest. When he retires, we're going to lose something out of the NFL that we're all going to talk about when we get a lot older and go, do you remember the time when Belichick coached the Patriots into 7 Super Bowls? I mean, this is something that's really huge.
6.
I'm sorry.
Well, you're already predicting this year, man.
Well, got him to 7. Is it got him to 7 or I don't know?
Well, no, they went to 9?
I don't know how many
9?
he's got him to. It's ridiculous. But my point is they're gonna expect that. They're gonna expect Tom Brady to drop a little bit, and that's obviously why they focused on the run game. That's again why they took another running back when their running back roster is huge.
Yeah.
I mean, they're gonna focus on it. It's gonna change a little bit. Losing Gronk is gonna be an issue, but they're gonna find other people around him to create weapons for Tom Brady not to put it all on him.
And Steve says, this is the same comment, but I mean, going into further what Steve was talking about. Look, if you're the Buffalo Bills, if you're the New York Jets, if you're the Miami Dolphins, how do you kind of combat Brady? You get back there and you hit him because he's 42, obviously, or he will be probably going into next year.
Yeah.
You got to do as much damage to a 42-year-old man as you can. That's why I think these teams are trying to focus on as much defense as they did, especially the Jets and the Bills. But even teams like the Dolphins drafted defensive linemen first because they want to sit there and try to make an impact on Brady. I don't fault them for that. I still think this is the Patriots' division to lose. But if I was a defensive coach, or if I was a head coach in that matter, or a GM, I would sit there and say, okay, how am I actually going to make an impact on this? I'm going to try to lay the wood to Tom Brady as much as humanly possible.
JP is also saying that the Patriots are going to win the division and they're going to have home field advantage, which makes a huge difference. And you're absolutely right, JP, and there's no doubt about it.
All right, let's talk about our fifth spot here, Drew, because this one's a little contentious. We have the Chargers at number 5, one spot lower than where they entered the offseason for us.
Even though they dropped a spot, it's mostly because of other teams and what they did during free agency and what we saw out of the draft and what we liked.
Thomas Davis didn't do it for you?
Like
37-year-old linebacker?
Like what other teams have done that put them above it. And to be honest with you, when you look at this Chargers team, there's no doubt about it. With Phillip Rivers at the helm, it's a dangerous team. And one thing that they had issues with was injuries, and their defense wasn't that good. Well, last year, they proved all that wrong. Unless there really is a curse for the LA Chargers, they're going to be right back in contention. You're talking again from the AFC West. 2 teams are going to have double-digit wins, fighting for playoff home field advantage late into the season. I mean, let's not ignore it. This Chargers team is good, and if they get everyone healthy on that defensive line and the secondary, man, watch out.
And I called this team fool's gold going into last year. I think, you look at the way they played the Ravens, you could sit there and say, oh, they were okay, but you look at what happened against the Patriots. I was kind of proven right a little bit. I think when you look at the Chargers, this is a team that needs to learn how to finish games. They need to learn how to, not even just games, they need to learn how to finish in general. They need to start blowing teams out because they didn't do that very much last year, even though they won a lot of games. Teams like Cincinnati, teams like the Titans, when they're not firing very well and their offense can't find its ass with both hands and they're struggling and you're in London, you need to do better than that. I mean, the Chargers, when I look at them, they're a good team, especially when you look at them on paper, but something is missing out of that attitude. They're missing that killer instinct that teams like the Patriots, teams like the Chiefs and the Saints and the Eagles and the Bears and everyone else we're going to be talking about have had. I mean, these teams, they crush teams when they have the chance to. The Patriots never really turned into that team that crushed them. I mean, Nick Mullins almost beat him with the 49ers. So, to me, that's the biggest weakness here. It's not anything on the field. It's not anything on paper. It's, does this team have the mentality and the kind of get-it-done attitude that they need to have to win a Super Bowl? That's where my biggest kind of question comes in with the squad.
Corey says he loves the Chargers, but he's not big on their front office management. I mean, why, man? I mean, what makes you think that? To be honest with you, they drafted really well. If you look at most of the seasons in the past, it's mostly been injuries. They cut Phillip Rivers after that crazy draft with Eli Manning, that whole whatever you want to call it. I think they've done well. I think they did as best as they could. And they got another issue is a lot of players, which is weird, they didn't want to play in San Diego. They have a hard time back then getting free agents to come to San Diego. They're in LA. Hopefully that changes for them. But to be honest, a team that's been 8-8 and relevant every now and then with players like LaDainian Tomlinson and Antonio Gates and now Phillip Rivers, dude, I don't know why you could hate their front office.
And John says the Chargers choked in the playoffs, but I think that was just their true colors coming out. I don't think that was a specific choke. I don't think they were like, oh, well, all of a sudden we're going to have one bad game and be out of it. This is a team that barely beat Jeff Driscoll. This is a team that barely beat Nick Mullins, a guy that wasn't a quarterback before the year started. They struggle with some teams they should have dominated. They have a problem with finishing games. They have a problem being the team that just goes in there and mauls somebody like Kansas City did. It's almost the reverse. Kansas City would go in there and maul somebody and let them creep back. The Chargers would just let them hang around, and they would barely beat these teams they should be blowing out. So, yeah, they had a great record last year, but they're not killing anybody. They're not sitting there going into a game like, we need to get way up on somebody. They need to get that mentality going back, or I'd see them being another early out in the playoffs again.
Corey says the reason he doesn't like them is because they're always quiet in free agency. Well, let me just tell you about this year alone. All the big names in free agency, there was no need for them. They don't need a safety. They don't need a corner. Linebacker maybe, but was it worth going out and get C.J. Mosley? They don't need a receiver. They got receivers. They don't.
You let one go.
They don't need a running back. You got Melvin Gordon. I mean, all the big names that were out there in free agency that you would have liked to see the Chargers go out and pick, they didn't need any of them. And like I said a little bit earlier, I think the issue was bringing players into San Diego. A lot of players didn't want to play in San Diego.
Let's talk about 4.
Let's do it.
The Chicago Bears, 2 spots higher than where they came in. They didn't do a lot, Drew, but they did just enough for us to sit there and say this team's going to be formidable.
I think this has a lot to do with your friend Bees, who's a huge Bear fan, who does a lot of communicating with you about how great the Bears are.
Actually, I love crapping on people's teams when they like somebody. You know that about me. No, not at all. I think when I look at what the Bears did, we said they needed to get better at running back if they traded Jordan Howard. And a lot of people would sit there and say, oh, trading Jordan Howard away should make the team worse. But they didn't really use him a lot last year, right? We saw them kind of migrate away from him. Instead, they brought in a cheap guy like Mike Davis. We saw what the Seahawks can make things happen.
And I absolutely
they drafted
love
David
their
Montgomery.
draft pick.
Exactly.
I love that draft
They
pick.
drafted Montgomery. They drafted a wide receiver in Riley Ridley to sit there and shore up this wide receiving room. They fixed the offense. You need to do a thing to this defense, okay? I would have liked to see Adrian Amos stay home and play in Chicago for another year. It didn't happen, but I still think they have the front seven. I think they're going to be absolutely fantastic on defense. Yet again, they got better on the offensive side of the ball, which is what you need to do. If this team goes a couple spots higher on the offensive ranking, this is going to be a team to beat. Look, they were a field goal away, a 43-yard field goal away from moving into the next round and playing the Saints. Who knows how that game turns out? Drew, I think this is going to be a great team next year. As long as Mitch Trubisky kind of stays on the same trajectory he's been, the Bears are a team to watch out for because of this defense and because the offense is going to supplement that.
Before I go into them real quick, I just want to say, Tony says, "What's up with my Bucks? I hope this coach lives up to its hype." I'm telling you right now,
that was the best thing they did this offseason.
Best thing they did. We have them ranked at number 31.
Ask me to say something else nice about the Buccaneers. I'm going to struggle.
And that's your second favorite team, too.
It is. I know.
And to be honest with you, man, it's just a struggle. Jameis Winston, to sit there and say he's your future or give him 1 year without going and looking towards, like, maybe possibly picking up another quarterback, I don't know how you can sit there and say that's your future. Bruce Arians, I love the coaching. I love him. I like the staff that he's bringing in around him. I just hope that they can turn this team around for all you Buck fans out there, but it looks like it's going to be a long
This is a
haul.
multi-year project, man. I mean, the best thing you did last year was throw the ball, and what happened? You subtracted from the wide receivers, losing guys like Adam Humphries and Deshaun Jackson going back to Philadelphia. So I kind of worry about the Buccaneers fans. Look, like I said, they're my second favorite team in the NFL. We had them drop 7 spots with their offseason moves and everything. We have them all the way down at 31, and you can't look at any of these other teams and sit there and say they had a good offseason. I mean, even the draft, they went and kind of reached on some guys that are a little more athletic in the secondary rather than guys that just play football well. I'm concerned. I'm concerned.
No, absolutely. And just going back to some of his comments, Brian said that Montgomery and Ridley are steals in this draft, man. That's
for third and fourth round pick.
That's exactly why I want to talk about these Bears. What they did and what the positions that they had drafting. I love their draft picks. I told you again, Montgomery's one of my favorite running backs out of this draft. I think he's capable of being a multi-purpose back. He's good at blocking. Coming out of Iowa State, he's a little bit under like the radar. A lot of people didn't pay attention to him. But I think they're absolutely going to love him up there in Chicago.
Is Ryan Pace back to being one of the great GMs? I mean, we were dogging him when he traded Jordan Howard for nothing, but
maybe. I like Trubisky again getting another chance in this offense, learning, getting more weapons around him. The guy absolutely shows all the ability to be a better quarterback than he's been playing so far. Even though a lot of people said, look at his highlights, he's done great. But what I really like is Khalil Mack having an off season with this defense, getting to learn his defense, even though he had a lot of the year to learn. I'm telling you, these off-season training and camps and all this stuff are huge about camaraderie, about building a team relationship, about wanting to play for your team. It's not just play as an individual. That's why coaches are so big about these players being there during, even though it's not mandatory. It's huge. And that's the reason why you got to give the Bears such a huge jump up here at number 4, because everything they've done is a plus.
Now, Tony, man, we're glad we're your new sports show. We always love talking with you. Make sure you're vocal in the comments. And if you're just watching, again, if you have something you want to talk about, we try to get to everything. We try not to veer too far off topic, but we try to stay with it, and we try to keep you guys involved. Thank you for being part of the show because it's more fun with you. Let's talk about our number 3 team, though.
Let's do it.
The Eagles. This is the big riser, Drew. 7 spots upward. I mean, what was their big knock against them? They don't run the ball, right?
They don't have a run game.
And their defense is kind of trash, but we'll talk about that in a second. They brought in Jordan Howard. Again, on the cheap. I think this is a fantastic move. This kind of mirrors them losing a guy like DeMarco Murray a few years ago for almost nothing. They brought in a quality, young running back who can make an impact on this team right away. They already have the offensive line to make it work. I love the Jordan Howard signing. Is he going to be an instant success? Maybe not, but just the fact that the threat is there that they can run the ball will open things up for Carson Wentz a little bit more and help this passing offense get even better than they already were.
Oh, I mean, you nailed it right on the spot. I love the Jordan Howard move. It was the right move. It was a team that needed a good running back, and they got one. He's only 24 years old.
And they didn't overpay for it.
He's only 24 years old. He'll be 25, I believe, this season. And you're talking about a guy that still has a lot of tread left on the tires. He was used heavily when he first got there, but ever since I just blanked out on the coach's name for the Bears, got there, they didn't use him as much. He didn't fit his offense. But guess what? He's going to fit perfectly fine with Peterson's offense. He's going to fit perfectly fine in there. They're going to love to run the rock right in the middle of that offensive line, who's very underrated but has some great offensive linemen on there. He'll find plenty of holes. That defense is a little bit of a question mark.
But they brought guys like Darby back, who's their best cornerback. Everyone was sitting there saying, I mean, he got hurt. And
they signed the right players.
Exactly. They've addressed the defensive line, even though they've lost some guys. They've kind of brought in the right replacements as well to keep that defensive line still one of the best ones in football, in my opinion.
It was a question mark going into free agency with all the players they were losing. But at the end of free agency, you're like, okay, you fixed it. And
Brian said Matt Nagy, just to help you out with Chicago's coach. But yes. I totally agree with you, man. They've addressed their needs. When they subtracted, they added guys that are going to be just as good, if not better, on this defensive line.
Right.
You look at it, they've kind of upgraded in the secondary. Another steal, I think, for them is a guy like J.J. Arcega-Whiteside, who's going to be another just huge receiver to go throw out there across from...
God, you're very high on.
Exactly. I think he was my favorite wide receiver going into this draft. Not necessarily because he's the most athletic guy, but he's a go up and get it guy. If you have a young quarterback, even though Carson Wentz has had some success, you let this guy go out there in the red zone, he's going to dominate. Even outside of it, you need 6 yards. You set him out there, you have him turn around, and you throw the ball up high. It's an 80-20 instead of a 50-50 pass. I love this addition. It's going to help out Aguilar. It's going to help out their other wide receiver, whose name I can't think of, but I love him. He's from the Bears.
Deshaun Jackson.
No, not. Well, they brought in Deshaun Jackson to stretch the field as well. Who am I thinking of? Their number one receiver. Alshon Jeffrey. Thank you. They've done nothing but add on this team. Yeah. I absolutely think they've done a great job of bringing things in there. I think the Eagles are going to be back to formidable. The only significant subtraction they have not done a good job of replacing, quarterback. Because if Carson Wentz gets hurt again, all this goes down the drain. Right? But we're betting on Carson Wentz staying healthy. We're betting on Carson Wentz saying, as long as he's out there, this team can beat anyone.
Yeah.
Let's talk number 2. Are you ready?
Guys, this is where we're going to lose a lot of you here because... it's going to look like we're being homers, but we're definitely
before we say
not.
anything, this has nothing to do with Drew. This was my pick. And this was my pick at number 1. You can, if you got any issue, you can take it up with me. We'll talk about them in a second. Let's talk about the number 2 spot.
I'll defend them because I believe it.
Let's talk about the number 2 spot. Thank you, Brian.
The Saints, the New Orleans Saints at number 2. I know everyone's got them on their board at number 1, if not number 2, behind maybe the Patriots because of all those Patriot fans.
Well, let me say this. Max Unger isn't there. And I know you drafted a guy to replace him, but what if he's not as good? You need to keep your 40-year-old quarterback in Drew Brees upright. Just like the Patriots, you have the same struggles. You've now got some kind of inconsistency on that offensive line. What else did we say going into this offseason, Drew? They need more wide receivers. They need a number 2 wide receiver to get some of this attention off of Michael Thomas.
Yep.
What did they not do? Go out and get any significant wide receiver, and I know they're up against it in the cap. They didn't have the money to spend like a team like Indianapolis. I would like to see something. I would like to see it be a Tyrell Williams or someone that I can sit there and point to and say, now he doesn't have to do it alone.
Yeah, they also lost Mark Ingram, and I know a lot of you guys that say Latavius Murray will fit in perfectly fine. Well, Latavius Murray's a lot older, has a lot more tread off his tires.
And not as good.
And he's not as good as Mark
Murray,
Ingram.
But he's not Mark Ingram.
I know you do. And I think those all make an issue. And let's not also forget, Drew Brees is 1 year older. He is 1 year older. As that defense, as much as it struggled early on, later on, or it actually kind of struggled all across the board last year. Can it find itself? 2 years ago, their defense was a strength of theirs. Last year was a little back and forth. There's a lot of great players. I'm thinking about the tackle that got hurt very late in the season. Man, he played one of his best seasons last year for the Saints. He got hurt at the end of the season. You're going to hope he comes back fully, and I cannot remember him. I'm sure, Brian, you'll help me out and let me know who that is. But that defense, is it what it needs to be to allow the Saints not to have to put up 30, 40, 50 points to win games?
Alvin Kamara comes back. You did a decent job of replacing Mark Ingram with Latavius Murray, so they did enough to make things happen. But, again, this is a one-spot decline, Drew, because they didn't have the offseason of a team like the Chiefs. And let's talk about them if you're ready, because Kansas City is taking our number 1 spot. I know Drew is the Kansas City kind of fan here. This is my pick, though. And he agreed with me. He agreed with me saying they're the number 1 pick. But this is my pick, and let me tell you why. What was the Chiefs' biggest issue last year? What were we all sitting there pointing at this team and saying this is why they won't win the Super Bowl? It's the defense. And I think, to their credit, they kind of looked at that and said, yeah. So what did they do? They signed Tyrann Mathieu.
Hold on. They got rid of Bob Sutton and then brought in
So even beyond on the field, yes, they kind of changed their scheme a little bit. That's a bit of an issue. I think, again, we've criticized some teams for changing schemes. We said it takes time to learn that. But if you're the Chiefs, that's okay because the defense wasn't any good to begin with. So, again, they brought in Tyrann Mathieu to play safety for them, a guy who's going to have much more impact than Eric Berry did with the way he was hurt and the way he was missing games. They also addressed this defensive line, which going into it, when they lost guys like Justin Houston and Dee Ford, I was like, man, the defense was already bad, and now they're about to lose their best part. They brought in Frank Clark. They already have Chris Jones. They just drafted Kalen Saunders, who I think is going to be one of the better prospects coming out playing next to a guy like Jones. He's going to be a great pass rusher who's going to be making an impact on this defensive line. He's a big guy. He's like 325 pounds, but he moves like a defensive end. They've added on this defensive line. I think they're going to be just fine in that spot. They may have even got better because Dee Ford, I don't think anyone's looking at Dee Ford saying he's the next heir apparent, the next great defensive end.
Especially not in a fourth
except maybe John Lynch. I think John Lynch was looking at saying he's going to be the next great defensive end.
And they focused on corner. They got rid of the corners that working. Steven Nelson is now a Steeler. Skandrick is gone. They brought in Breland. I mean, they focused on every spot of that defense and said, we got to get better here. And even if it's...
let's at least play musical chairs and change some of these guys
even though they haven't played together one single down, you got to sit there and go, they focused exactly what needed to happen, and if you're the
10th defense, this is a negative, right? You're like, nobody's used to each other. The chemistry isn't there. When you're the 32nd or 31st or 30th, wherever they finish,
it's terrible.
Exactly. It's okay to play. It's okay to play these games because you're not getting any worse than they already were. I think the Chiefs did some aggressive moves to get better on the defensive side of the ball. Look, I know everyone's sitting there saying Tyreek Hill's up in the air. Maybe he gets suspended. It doesn't matter. This team's making the playoffs, and by then Tyreek Hill will be back. I get it. Kareem Hunt's not there. They brought in Carlos Hyde. They drafted some guys to try to make things happen. That's okay. It's a running back. I think especially when you look at the way they played even without Kareem Hunt, they had some success at running back still. I mean, Damian Williams only averaged like 4.5 instead of 6 yards a carry. Boo-hoo. I think there's a lot of teams that would kill for 4.5 yards a carry. I think the Chiefs are going to be just fine. They're still the team to beat in the NFL. For me, they move up 2 spots here, and I got to sit there and say they had a great offseason. The only big negative I can sit there and say was their first draft pick, the guy whose name I'm drawing a blank on. They overreached saying, what if Tyreek Hill isn't here? We need a fast guy to replace him.
Mecole Hardman.
Thank you. This, to me, is their biggest negative, but again, it's still a roll of the dice, it's okay.
It was a panic pick.
Right.
But I think all said and done, it was the right pick. George says, I feel like back-to-back heartbreaking season enders for my Saints will make a great run this year, especially with a chip on their shoulder.
They're going to make a great run, but that was supposed to be last year, right? When they got not cheated, but when they got cheated out of their position in the playoffs by that great play by Stephon Diggs at the end of the Vikings game there. This was supposed to be the year they kind of answered that. Again, they kind of got that snatched out of their way. I just wonder how long can you keep up the intensity. That's kind of a minus for the Saints for me. But they're still a very good team. I still think this is their great division to win, right? Yep. I don't think anyone's picking the Falcons or the Panthers or the Buccaneers to come steal this from them.
Right, and the Chiefs at number 1. And guys, I tell you right now, I didn't have to talk him into it all. He came in with it already written like that. And to be honest with you, when you have a player like Patrick Mahomes, and I know Jeffrey, you're going to sit there and tell me he still needs a couple seasons. Well, guess what? I mean, even if you drop down just a little bit.
He's the MVP.
Even if you drop down just a little bit and you throw for 40 touchdowns and 4,000 yards, you're still up there at the top.
Absolutely. So, again, guys, I don't want to sit there and say it's all Drew or any of this kind of decision was on him. This was my pick, and he just wound up agreeing with what I said. So, look, the Chiefs are the team to beat in the NFL right now because the defense has gotten better. The offense is still the best in the NFL as well. If the defense, like I said, Drew, they don't have to be 31st to top 10 to be good. If they go from 30 to 20, this team could win the Super Bowl. I think that was the biggest knock I had against them in the run. Is like, what is this defense going to do in the playoffs? They kind of faltered a little bit in the first half of the playoffs first half of the game against the Patriots. Going forward, I think they're in a much better position to kind of stand up to those teams. The Chiefs are the best team, in our opinion, after the offseason. Hey guys, thanks for watching. We hope you enjoyed what you saw. If you did, make sure you subscribe to our page here and throw us a like if you don't mind.
Guys, remember this is Sports Around the Bar, so grab your favorite drinks, join one of the fastest growing communities on YouTube. We can't wait to hear from you.